Howdy, how you doing?
I am doing well. Good to see you as always in our once a month fandom time that we have with each other.
Yes,
So
it's
great,
the only
great
way
to
I
be
get to
here.
talk to you, so I'm
Yeah,
glad we do
right.
this.
Yes. Otherwise, we're far too busy for each other. So busy.
Right.
Yeah. Well, 54 people just jumped right in. That's awesome. We're good. As usual, I'll start at the beginning. Jump around, John, if you see questions along the way. But I'll get our first one going here, and let's see
Okay.
what we got. Sometimes I feel guilty about past compulsions. I made those choices out of fear, but they still shame me. It also affects other memories of events that occurred around the same time, like it has made those periods of my life emotionally radioactive. How would you address this in therapy? Sometimes I slip with mental review and self punishment, but I'm managing okay.
Well, I feel like I mean I'm thinking a few things. One is I would want the person to I would want you to use your guilt in a positive way,
Okay.
which and partially you're already on your way there. Like I always feel if somebody slips and then they feel guilty. I mean, no offense, like who cares? But if you slip and feel guilty and that prevents future slips, I think that's like pretty decent. So it sounds like, from what you're saying, um, the things that you don't like in the past that you did, you're not doing those anymore. And it would be nice to forgive yourself. And forgiving yourself doesn't mean like, oh, you won't feel really horrible, icky, like, oh, I can't believe I did that. Oh, that's okay. Forgiving yourself is, I understand, like, I was a different person then. Whether like I didn't know as much as I know now, or whatever emotional things were making it hard for me to make different decisions. So I'm going to forgive that person for not knowing any better, and because I'm different from them. And although this never helps anybody, I always like to think, would you dump on another person who had had your past and it improved? And if you wouldn't, then you have a double standard. And people like Patrick and me always hope, like, double standard. Okay, now you're not going to do it. I understand it doesn't work that way, but
Specialness. Yeah.
but I
Hmm.
would demand that
Hmm.
you write a convincing argument that logically proves why you should be forever tortured by this, but somebody else should be forgiven.
Hmm.
And if you can present us with that document, that would be great. Otherwise, you may have to deal with, maybe I can start working on letting myself be the newer person.
Yeah. I want to address the sometimes I slip with mental review and self punishment. I do that too, and I don't have OCD. So I'd like to say, welcome to being a human, first of all, because that's part of being a human being. We all look back on things that have happened in our lives from time to time, or are reminded of things that go, "Ugh, God, why did I do that one? Why was that the one the way that Um, I I could run a litany of things that I look back on now and go, well, that was a bad one. That was a bad choice. Um, are those emotionally radioactive experiences of my life? Well, I'm not fond of them, and I'm not fond of them coming back here and there. But I also know that I can handle them, right?
Am I
Like
not allowed
I
to
can
think
handle the
of them?
emotion and whatever.
Yeah. Are you
Right.
not allowed to think of them? That would be a problem.
Yeah. Because OCD rules are, of course, these things should never be brought up again or thought of, which I always find fascinating because people get angry that they think of things without recognizing that many times in OCD, the reason you're thinking something is you're checking to see if you're thinking it. And how can you do anything but think of it if you're checking to see if you're thinking of it? So I don't know.
We
Like,
hope that was helpful.
yeah. I always love talking about lice, John. I always will go into a discussion and say, after a minute, just watch the crowd and see who starts itching and everything like that. And isn't it fascinating? Just a minute of talking about lice led to a physical reaction. Why,
Mm-hmm.
why wouldn't other thoughts lead to things as well too? When you have something as innocuous as just talking about lice. So.
I am working so hard to not scratch my head right now because I do have this itch right in the middle that's there, and I'm like, but I want to be cool.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I'm just suffering with it, with the feeling of like, oh my God, is this going to be here the entire time we're talking? Which allows me then to practice what I preach and be mindful.
we must practice ERP.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. But if I crack up, it's your fault.
It's always my fault. I'm good with that. Yeah. So, uh, any particulars you looked at, John? You thought were good there? I'll keep going through. Otherwise,
I really like that one.
That one? Okay.
God, yeah.
Yeah, take it. So ERP Imaginals for existential OCD is freaking me out. There seems to be no end to the amount of scripts I have to write. Any additional tips you have for this theme? Take it away.
Well, I feel like if you're writing, oh God, I really feel like giving in and scratching my head.
How are the lice, John? Yes, how are the lice?
They're all just in one spot, which proves they're there. When you say ERP Imaginals for existential OCD are freaking you out, my guess would be that I don't know that you actually want to exist in a world where the existential possibilities might be the truth, including the terrifying existential possibility that there are no truths. So I mean, I don't know that you need multiple ERPs for every situation you could think of, as much as are you willing to live? I think the focus of the Imaginals has to be like, what are the worst fears? And is it that nothing is potentially true, or everything's potentially true? And how do I live in a world that might not really exist? Where the closest you can come to truth would be, I seem to be something that experiences things that may or may not have any actual outside reference, So I don't know if they're just feelings and thoughts that just me, or it spreads my eyebrows now. That don't exist beyond that, and I mean, the one thing that never seems to help people is, well, you might want to live as if this life is true, because like it might be.
Right.
But some people just find that like, well, this one's not true. I just don't really care. I was working with one person who was kind of determined to pretty much almost do nothing because everything might be fake, including me. And I had to ask him two questions. One, why are you eating foods that taste good? Because they were willing to exclude so many things. Like, why do that if it's fake? They were engaging in sex, and so like, again, why are you doing that? And my thought is like, if it's all fake, but you're able to produce a life that seems real, well, it seems a lot better than just sitting being bored doing nothing, right? I mean, I don't have complete control over it, because apparently I can't create anything I want, but I might as well enjoy that. It might be real, but also the other would just be horribly boring. And of course, the other thing this fellow did that really made no sense at all, since he was trying to not do things, like he didn't want to get in a relationship because what if he wakes up and it's not there? Why do you watch movies? Because they are fake. So I wonder to what extent you want to learn how to live in an existential world where you're making guesses and something's important for no other reason that you've decided that, and you're allowing that to be good. I hope I'm hitting his existential problems if he didn't explain it further. But yeah.
Well, I wonder this too. The notion of I have to do an ERP for every single thing versus ERP can translate to so many things. And if I learned how to do ERP, it can automatically apply itself to all of this stuff without me having to pick. Now I have to do one for this one. Now I have to do one for this one. Now I have to do one for this, versus my lifestyle will be, when this happens, here's how I'm going to apply whatever I need to do.
Yeah. So, and I think it depends on what his goal is with ERP. If his goal is ERP should make me not care about this, and so it's kind of like it's okay if the world's not real. Well, I don't know. That would almost be positive. Is he trying to look for anxiety to go down, or is the concern, in which case that won't work as well, or is he really trying to learn to live in a world where it's completely uncertain and he knows nothing?
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm wondering. So those are my tips.
So maybe we'll hear more from Charles, and we'll get some more
Yeah.
later on. Savoy says, I just found out I have OCD, and one habit of mine is continuously blinking and swallowing. Any tips to prevent this from happening as often? So when you have a somatic kind of OCD where you're really focusing on things that are automatic, but now you're trying to bring them under some kind of control, because OCD will often say to you something along the lines of, how do you know that you did it the right way? And what if you could have done it better? Maybe you didn't swallow enough. Maybe you didn't blink well enough or something. I've often prescribed the opposite. I don't know if you've done this, John, but let's both blink weird or odd or different, or try to be in total control of it for the next 5 minutes. And after several minutes of this, people start to get exhausted of it and be like, "Oh, can we stop now?" It's like, well, why? Wouldn't doing this really fulfill exactly what you would wanted to be in trying to total control of this and have no subconscious take over, but you are in this, and after a while, people in the exhaustion of it kind of go back to blinking normal and realize, oh, I can actually handle that, and maybe,
That's one version.
yeah, that's how I've worked on it. But
Yeah.
what have you done?
Well, no. I mean, no, that's one I mean, that's one set of blinking problems.
Yeah.
I agree with you completely. The other set of blinking problems is that soy doesn't want to notice they're blinking.
That could be.
The hyper awareness aspect of it, and or swallowing, and trying to figure out, like, in which case, um, in hyper awareness we and the thing about hyper awareness is it's the one form of OCD where it seems like your feared consequence is coming true, because the statement is, life is horrible as long as I notice this, and as long as you make that decision, life is horrible. So the goal is, I would like to be able to be blinking and noticing it and not caring. Now a lot of people initially respond to that as like, wait, you mean noticing it forever? And yeah, but also not caring. And like a broken record, Patrick can now say, like, we have tinnitus. It's always, like, Patrick didn't notice it till I mentioned it, likely, unless this question brought it up for him.
I knew you were going to go there, so it was already.
Yeah. So I have a good repertoire, but limited, and again, my tinnitus, I hadn't noticed it all day till I mentioned it, but I said I hadn't noticed it. Tinnitus is actually always there. So all somebody has to say is tinnitus, and I actually am hearing a real sound. So, but to get to a state where it's okay for it to be there, that is a lot of work. Um, and we kind of know you can do that, because if I were to say to you, imagine you're going to notice you're blinking like the most incredibly alert, in your face way for the next 5 minutes. I mean, just relentlessly noticing. But that after that 5 minutes, it's going to be gone. Not that you're not going to be blinking, you're just not going to notice it. How would you be? And if you're like almost everyone, you'd be like, oh, well, yeah, I wouldn't care then. That'd be fine. And it's really weird because we actually haven't done anything. That first 5 minutes of blinking is the same whether it's there for 5 or 5 hours. And yet you did something in your head that made it okay. You think the thing you did in your head is, oh, it's because it's going to be over. And I would say, well, because it's going to be over is the reason you did this. But bottom line is, you suddenly said, oh, this is allowed to be there. Now, for you to get into that state is a lot of work. And so one of the things we do, I want you to engage in all your activities that you normally engage in, but I want there to be reminders about your blinking all around.
There you go.
So the reminders are basically, to so that you And the reminder is kind of cool because it reminds you of your blinking. You think I don't need a reminder, but sometimes you might forget for a brief second. You blink and then you notice it's like, oh my god, it's back. The reminder is kind of like, oh darn, it's there, but the reminder is there that I'm supposed to live with this. And for blinking and or swallowing, and you can also make a tape. So you could record a tape that you'd put on an infinite loop where you'd say blink, or maybe
Blink,
for you, you
blink,
have both.
blink.
Well, no, not that often. No. And for her, she has two, so I might just want to go
Yeah.
it. But
There you go. There you go.
20-second space, it, like a 40-second space, it, and then leave it like 10 to 15 seconds blank. And that way you have a kind of a little bit of randomness in hearing the word, because blink, blink, blink will actually take his or her attention off it. This way, it keeps being like that shock. So it's not there constantly, but it's there enough that they have to deal with it. And in my dream world, you're playing that around the clock. You're watching a TV show, that's fine. It's playing there. And then meanwhile, on your TV, there should be like a little red dot you can buy at Staples, and on your TV. On your cell phone, change your background. So every time you look at your phone, it reminds you of your stuff. So a lot of things to basically make it impossible to not think about, so that you'll slowly get used to it. So it's not to not notice it. It's to be able to enjoy everything while you're noticing you're blinking. I am still talking and really conscious right now, despite the fact of the lice crawling in my eyebrows and the top of my head from Patrick.
I see
it might
them, by
last
the way.
forever.
I can see it right there. Yeah. B says, it's my first time dealing with someone in his family with OCD, who is in constant anguish, trying to get support set up for him. Is there anything you can say or do to comfort them? He doesn't believe he can get out of this vicious cycle. Oh, go ahead.
No.
I was going to just say, this is the hard part, really, for families who will want to figure out the thing to say, probably under the auspices of, once I say the right thing in the right tone, at the right volume, at the right angle, at the right time of day or something, I will relieve this person of their concerns and fear. Well, John and I know that won't happen. As much as we wish that it would, and that you could do that, we know that will not happen. So our goal is not to help people figure out that. Our goal is quite the opposite. How do you get somebody who's feeling that way to do some treatment? And you've got, I think, two options. Number one, you bring them into a treatment session and feel free to join them, and hopefully we can get somebody to be very convincing, or you have them watch us talk about these things. If you want to do that, that can be very helpful. But number two, there often in these types of situations comes a point where you have to make a decision as a family. Will we no longer accommodate the obsessive compulsive disorder? And will we live in a way that says we love you and we support you, but we don't love and support your OCD? And so we will no longer accommodate that. And might that be something that is motivating to the person to actually go and get some treatment when people stop giving into some of the accommodations? And I'm not saying radically like strip away every single accommodation today, right? That's not it whatsoever. But it is, how do we get people moving toward what's going to be best for me? Us giving in more and more to their OCD, having more conversations about it, trying to convince them more and more that they'll be okay, and tell them how much we love and care for them and all those things, which are all wonderful things, right? But also OCD loves those things too and eats them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So sometimes it has to be, as much as we love you, we're going to work on doing the thing that's going to be best for you. And what we found out is that the best thing for you isn't to give you all of the reassurance, help you with all the distraction, assist you in all the avoidance, provide you with all of the substances, and allow you to do all the compulsions and bring us into them as well too. Because if those things actually worked, your family would be a very healthy family. Since you're doing those things, I'm going to bed, and you're saying that things are probably getting worse instead of better, the opposite has to come into play. And if your relative will not come into treatment, you can always work with somebody who can help guide you into doing some of those things, again, in a very ethical way, but to allow your family to get back living the life that you want to live as a family and not have it be ruled by OCD running your household.
Everything Patrick said with a few caveats.
Go right ahead.
I mean, one is just some resources that you should check out. I mean, there's some really wonderful podcasts put
Of
out by
course.
the OC Foundation, iocdf.org. There's also something called theocdstories.com.
Yep.
So both of those are really reasonable information because OCD, of all the mental health problems that there are, although it is one of the most devastating, it's actually the one we have the greatest success with.
Yes.
So I would want your loved one to be at least hear that. The one caveat is, although treatment for OCD has been around since 1985, and I'm actually lying, it's around before that, but I'm giving people a chance to read the research. And although the American Psychological Association, the American Psychiatric Association agree that exposure response prevention is the gold standard of treatment for OCD, and although the OC Foundation says that, and every expert in OCD will say that, it's actually hard to find OCD treatments. On the average, it often takes people 14 to 17 years to find treatment. So you are stuck trying to find somebody not who claims they treat OCD.
Right.
You're going to need to kind of check them out. They at least have to say they do ERP. ERP is a kind of cognitive behavior therapy, but if they say they do cognitive behavior therapy, that's not good enough. It at least has to be ERP. On the IOCDF's website, International OCD Foundation, they have a find a therapist. Obviously, every therapist on there says they treat OCD. They have not been vetted, but some of them will have gone through something called a BTTI, Behavior Therapy Training Institute. So,
know anybody who's a faculty on that, John? At all? Maybe the two of us. I don't know.
Yeah. And I can't remember. Do they list faculty? Do they list? Do they say be faculty? Okay. So they can do that, or better, be a faculty on it. And those are people who have a higher probability of doing the right thing. So depending where you live, that may be harder or easier to find. But we just so often see people do the wrong thing. It's actually easier to help somebody with OCD than change the behavior of mental health professionals. So, because those people will not help your loved one and will just further create the illusion like, yeah, nothing will work. So we would like them to have, it's a really harmful experience to get the wrong therapy and be told it's the right thing.
Fun things. The No OCD Foundation's creating a vetted list of therapists right now as well.
Am I on it?
You are going to be on it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
So just so you know, and I think that you're right though, John. The other piece is if you do meet with a therapist, never feel bad about asking them questions. And if they look at you like, how dare you ask me questions? Don't go see that therapist. That's not the right therapist for you, right? Any ERP therapist would be willing to sit down with you and tell you exactly what they do and how they do it and the rationale behind it.
And I think, tell me if you think this one's right. I mean, we know I think it's right, but I'm checking with you. I think one of the things that the therapist should say about OCD is that part of the treatment goal is to learn to live with uncertainty.
Yes. Doubt, uncertainty, discomfort.
Yeah, because if they're not saying that, then they're probably not good.
Right. Don't fall also for, I won't state the name of the website, but don't fall for, if you go on that website and you look at a therapist and they list that they specialize in 47 different things, do not believe that to be true. That is impossible. And I think even fraudulent myself, that anybody could list that they specialize in that many things. So.
Right. That's kind of the shotgun approach. Let's claim I treat everything and somebody's bound to come to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. John, you're going to love this one. I'm just going to pop it right on there and I'll read it out loud for everyone. I keep trying to find a piece of information that will make my brain click and suddenly make my OCD anxiety and social anxiety disappear. But I have come to accept that this will never happen. But the problem is that I keep feeling like I'm not living up to my potential. And this rekindles my belief that there is something I could do to overcome this anxiety or whatever it is. I'm confused.
Well, I think what a lot of times I say about treatment is that it's simple. I mean, now, simple and hard are not related. So I think it's really simple, but it's really hard. So the idea that I'm living up to or not living up to my potential, which would be really hard to define when I'm living up to my potential, um, I think is a measure that's not going to really be useful to a person. It's really basically pretty unkind and judgmental, and implicit in it is kind of a should, like you should be living up to your potential. Like if you're not, that's terrible. I think there's nothing you should do.
Don't shit all
I,
over the place.
it's shitting all over themselves.
Mhm.
I think if you're going to be responsible, then you take the actions that will lead to the goals that you have. And maybe the other thing is that, and the other thing is that you also would accept the consequences of it. If I want to be an actor, if I want to be only a Hollywood actor in a good big movie, then I have no business being an actor because that's probably not going to happen. If I like acting, that makes sense. So I would really just change your entire world to something that you would find really hard, which is I would like to try to do something that I enjoy doing. And so I don't care if you enjoy the most mundane job in the world or whatever. But so like what can I do? I can control. I can enjoy being a psychologist and hope that I'm good. But like, do I get to be a millionaire psychologist or like, I don't get to control any of that. So, what's the part I can do? I feel like you haven't spent enough time trying to think like, what do I want to do? Or if there are limits to what you can do, because, financial or whatever, it's like, what's as close as I can get without this measure of like, I've lived up to my potential. Otherwise, I'm a deficient human being and a waste of space. Because I don't know
Well,
how one ever knows they're living up to their potential.
well, that's what I was going to say. How do you know the potential you're trying to live up to is the best potential? I mean,
Yeah.
if if it's the OCD potential, you're always going to fail because you're going to be Sisyphus and you're never going to get the stone up to the top of the hill because that's the way OCD works. But if the potential to live up to is the acceptance of doubt and uncertainty and discomfort, I think that that's a very attainable potential that people could have. So I'm wanting to make sure that the potential that you're moving towards one that is attainable versus one that is not attainable. Because why pick an unattainable potential? All you're going to do is be disappointed for the rest of your life. Whenever I'm working with people, I always talk about the goals that we're setting have to be realistic goals. They have to be attainable goals. And sometimes people will say to me, but that's too easy. I've got to do this, this, and this. I said, yeah, but the way you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And the only way to get to there is to first get to here. And so let's get there and celebrate that win. And then we'll get to there. And then we'll get to there. And then we could do it. But so many people shoot themselves in the foot before they get started.
And I have two things. One, I want to thank you for the elephant because that, for some reason, just grosses me out enough. I'm not thinking about the lice in my head. Yeah,
There's my elephant. Yeah.
it's gotten rid of the lice.
Mhm.
And you have to remember that when you look at other people who you feel they've reached their potential, that doesn't mean they feel it.
Right.
I mean, like looking at Patrick and his success, I'm thinking really confident of his being in his potential, but I don't know if I've really reached my potential and good enough. Luckily, I don't care
Yeah, right.
because I just have fun when I'm doing. So
Hey,
I'm happy if I'm having fun.
You did beat that video game, so I'd say you met your potential.
Which one?
There. The one you were talking about the last time, the one that.
No, I'm still in the middle of that. I'm 160 hours in.
Oh, you're still in the middle? I thought you had finished.
It is. I please. I'm going to read. This is really self-control. I could do 10 minutes on why this game is incredible. And, now I have to say it's such an incredible game and so variable. I am already planning my second playthrough for when I finally finish this one. I think I have another 20 to 30 hours.
Okay. Cool.
So, yeah. So you've just corroborated that I have not reached my potential and I'm a failure.
That'll be your next award at IOCDF for the therapist who still hasn't achieved his potential, John Grayson. Please come up stage. Chloe says, I have a question. My OCD themes used to switch around all the time, which we see happen, right? But in 2020 quarantine, one hit me and hasn't switched, which could also happen. Why do some stick longer than the other? Also, with my harm OCD, I always hear deep down, you are, but I started testing to see how I felt deep down all the time. I feel I've convinced most days I'm evil. Don't people with OCD know these thoughts or feelings aren't real for them? For me, it really feels like it's me, that I am the exception. Well, boy,
great news. Oh,
great news. There it is.
Fantastic
we got it.
News. You are just like every other OCD sufferer.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Award for you.
Nobody knows deep down that they're not evil. They're afraid they might be, or they kind of feel they are. So, what? I guess I'm thinking there's this question that I have no answer for, where I've imagined these two people. I have two different examples to give.
Okay.
This is the nicer one. One person is always really nice to other people, and they really are helpful, and they really love doing that. The other person doesn't really like people, and they don't really, they're kind of a curmudgeon, but like they make themselves do the nice things because they think it's right. And the question is, who's the better person? The one who does it easily, or the one who has to suffer to do good? Now, don't answer the question because I'm not going to tell you the right answer because I don't know. And the second is, I am sure that there are some people in the world who are definitely have pedophilic feelings. I mean, they definitely know that, oh my God, messing around with a little 6-year-old would be the best thing in the world. But they never do it because they think it's wrong. So they didn't ask for those feelings. I think they cope with them in a pretty admirable way. And I bet, and that doesn't even mean they're at risk to do it. Now, I don't know if you're going to call them evil for having these feelings. And by the way, if you are going to call them evil, if you have a brother or a sister who has those feelings and told you like, wow, I've got these feelings, I would never do it. I don't know if you think they're evil deep down. So I think the goal is to learn to be, first of all, I think everybody's got evil in them. So if you don't want any evil in you, that's pretty hard. And if you want to match thought for thought, I'm feeling I could be more evil than you. And one of the things you should deal with is, even though I know you're thinking about doing horrible, terrible, harmful things to people, but do you know every one of our listeners and everybody that our listeners are related to who's an adult actually are perfectly fine with allowing children to die?
Oh, I knew you were going to go there. I remember this one.
Go ahead. Thank you. Because, hey, people are spending money on luxuries instead of sending the money to save children. And then the question would be like, how much money is the right amount of money to give? Like, how much do I need to deprive myself? Because, like, what can I possibly want that's worth a dead child? So everybody, I don't know, like, I do believe, I'm hoping it's okay that I spend money on myself. But unless somebody unless somebody tells me I'm going to hell for that, don't care. I'm going to keep doing it anyway. So I'm asking, so there's a certain level of evil or not caring in all of us. Your problem is you're trying to figure out, like, are these thoughts true or not, and how much do I want to do them? I'm concerned with, are you actually engaging in evil? So, are you like, eating little children, or robbing or doing a lot of terrible things? As for your thoughts, when somebody asked Stephen King, why do you think such horrible things? And his answer is, what makes you think I have a choice? Not that he thinks, not that he has OCD, but like he thinks about the nature and good and evil. And to write a good story, he's got to think like, why would it be good to do this horror? How do we know everyone thinks that way? Do you want to give the answer, Patrick, or can I?
Go right ahead, please.
He's rich.
There you go.
Everybody's reading that stuff. So, if you were watching the old HBO show True Blood, with the good and bad vampires, and the heroine is in love with a good vampire, and every time they have sex explicitly, it's HBO, they have to show that every episode. He chomps down on her neck, blood comes pouring out, and in this show, it's a good thing, and the fans love it. Are they all sick, horrible, evil people? Which given the popularity of the show, is scary. So you might be as bad as the rest of us.
Maybe.
Maybe. Yeah, it's hard to be. I'd be surprised if she could match me. But until you're sure that you're actually going to engage in these behaviors, I would like you to pretend it's OCD and act and take the risk. Like, it might be true, but since you're not acting on it, we're going to hope it's OCD. But not that we know. And as for evil, well, rather than thinking of are you evil, I'm just hoping you're good enough. Which you might be evil, but maybe good enough.
Yeah. And I always love to pick on the phrase that's right in there. For me, it really feels like if there's two words that I love to talk about in OCD, it's the words feels like. And everyone will say, but it feels so real. It feels like it feels. And my reply is always the same. Well, it has to. Because if it didn't feel real, John and I don't have a job.
Yeah, and we need a job. I feel like I would use as a measure, I would need you to tell me something like, you know what? Me putting my hands around the throat of an 8-year-old and squeezing and watching the blood rush to his head and his eyes bulge out in terror, I know without a doubt that would be so cool. If you've got that one, but you have to have the thought, not without doubt. If you're suddenly going like, oh my God, do I think that? Sorry, not good enough. It's got to be like, oh no, that would be great. I mean, I want to get caught, don't want to go to jail, but oh God, would that be great? So if your thoughts are like that, then, okay, it's not OCD. Or it's OCD plus.
Yeah.
But as long as you're having a doubt, like, do I think that? I have to check, do I think that? Not good enough. It has to be definite.
Yeah. So don't be fooled by the it feels like thing. The way a lot of these conditions work, of course, is that they have a direct link into the fight, flight, or freeze response. And we are very trained in our life that if the fight, flight, or freeze response is triggered, it means there's danger and we got to get the heck out of here. So if you think about it, if these conditions can utilize that and know that that's the way we respond to the fight, flight, or freeze response, why wouldn't these conditions utilize the fight, flight, or freeze response to convince us how real the condition really is?
And by the way, we are not saying all this ends up with the conclusion you're not evil.
Right.
Everything's uncertain. You might be evil. I just hope you don't act on it. The only thing that really confuses me about you, Chloe, is looking at the picture that goes with your name. I don't get it. But I'm pretty sure that's not a sign of evil. If so, let me know.
Yeah, could be. Chris says, I've been doing ERP for about 6 months and your OCD told you your OCD symptoms have improved by 58%. That's great. Yeah. Well, yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. Here's one of the things. We definitely utilize various measures. Now, that's one way of assessing how things are, right? There's other ways to look at too. There's going to be clinical judgment. There's going to be your own feeling about recovery and all of that as well too. So, there are multiple ways that we're going to look at the way that people will improve. And sometimes a paper and pen thing will give us a great indication. Other times on paper, you may have seen a decrease in a lot of symptoms, but you still feel as if it's really not there. We also have to set expectations for treatment for anybody as well too. And sometimes those expectations are, I'm not better until I never have an intrusive thought, image, or urge ever again, which of course isn't anywhere that we want to go as well too, because we know that that's not going to be the case. So multiple things to take a look at for us, right? We're never going to rely just on one method of assessment. We're going to take a look at clinical judgment, your feelings, paper and pencil, all of those types of things to give us different ideas. Matt says a little shout out to you here, John.
Matt's just being friendly.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Matt. Thank you. Love doing it with you. I particularly like the next one also.
The A team. Dun, 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 dun. Is it safe for you to count calories with OCD? You really want to get your weight under control. You're afraid of developing an eating disorder.
Definitely, maybe. And the reason I say that is there'd be a ton of people who have OCD, and it's no problem at all because whatever their OCD is focused on is not likely to switch to that. You know, if I have a contamination problem, it's probably not going to transfer that. If depending on how much you already know, you know, your obsessional about your weight and your appearance, and all of those things, yes, you might need a different kind of structure to go on a diet. So I guess the answer is I don't know enough about you to give you an intelligent answer.
I've always liked this. Um, Scared I'm going to do something in my sleep. Is this common? I have intrusive thoughts all the time about this. I have definitely seen this one where people even want to set up like, how can I put a lock on the door so that if I were to sleepwalk, I wouldn't be able to get it, or it would be attached to bells and cans on strings, like a car after a wedding, and all those noises might wake me up because John, I could sneak out of my house, go into my neighbor's home, kill all of them with the cutlery, and then sneak back into my home and crawl right back into bed, and no one will
I
know.
have a much easier time. Kathy is next to me. I just have to stab her to death in my sleep. I don't have to get out of that. I don't have to do anything so complicated as leave the house.
Yeah, well,
And the
I
thing that
do,
we're
unfortunately.
saying, Kelly, is um, everything in life is the odds. So I can say it's a low probability that you'll do that. Low probability is not no probability. The good thing is having OCD does not make you more likely than me to do that thing. It probably requires a very specific form of temporal lobe epilepsy to do it. So it's not really common. And the odds are, remember, it's got two sets of things. Not only you have to have temporal lobe epilepsy to do something really horrible in your sleep, to do something in your sleep, you're also going to have to specifically do a horrible thing, which the odds
Mhm.
are also against. So the best you and I can do is hope it doesn't happen. And if you're sleeping with somebody else, you know, there's no reason they shouldn't get up and massacre you. I understand you won't be at fault then, so that's really good. But you're calling it an intrusive thought. I call it a really creative thought. And the only thing that's intrusive, you're like, you want to know that it's not going to happen. And I would ask you to think like, well, maybe it'll happen. And how will I try to cope with it? I mean, that would be awful the next day, but like, if it really did happen, you'd have to do something. Suicide's not allowed. You're condemned to life. Um, but yes, it's to live with the risk and not set up the cowbells everywhere.
Mhm. ABF, is there a way to do scruple exposures for Catholics without bringing to mind the most blasphemous exposure images? Well, let me throw a few things out. Number one, if the most blasphemous exposure images are not the intrusive thoughts, images, or urges or obsessions you have, I don't need to bring them into the picture of treatment. I only need to expose you to the intrusions that you experience. So you're going to tell me what the thoughts and the images and the urges are that you experience as your obsessions, and we're going to create a hierarchy to work on exposing you to them. If you think there's even worse ones out there and you're afraid that I'm going to purposely expose you to those because it would just be fun to do, I wouldn't do that. I don't throw things at people like that. I don't purposely do those types of things to scare people away, and I don't necessarily believe all the time that you have to go above and beyond on things. John and I have done panels on this at various conferences and discussed this, and there are times that we definitely go above and beyond. We'll work with someone specifically to do so. But in other situations, I also don't have to violate religious laws. So if you're Catholic and you're afraid, well, will you bring a Ouija board into the session? Well, no, because I know that my cousin's a priest. I know that your religion says that's not allowed, right? And so I wouldn't do that. Now, if you have intrusive thoughts about it, we will potentially look at it as an exposure. not in trying to get you to love it and think it's awesome or great or anything like that, but allow you to be able to recognize that you can deal with the thought or the image or the urge of the experience. So, would you want to add anything to that, John?
I think that's basically it. I mean,
Okay.
and often for exposure, like if we thought that the blasphemous, first of all, as Patrick said, you're already thinking of the
Yeah.
blasphemous image you don't want. And I don't have to come up with one that's worse because you will.
Right.
It's like you're going to like, well, that's the most blasphemous image. You're like, well, actually, this is the most one. It's like, okay, we'll work on that one. But we can also, uh, we will often have we'll find a priest that we'll all consult with who will say like this is why we can do this exposure, but we would set that up because there's certainly a range of priests to choose from. So
Yeah. Joe asks, is there a certain amount of determination and grit required in order to beat OCD? Well, it definitely takes motivation, right? And the motivation is that you're willing to face the things that are in your head without doing a compulsion to neutralize them. I mean, I think, John, you'd probably agree with me. It all really kind of does come down to that. Are you willing to allow whatever's there to be there without doing something to neutralize it?
yes, but I can never just shut up.
You would
So
never just
yeah.
accept something. You must add something else,
Well,
of course.
yeah. So the other thing is because there's a little bit of a delusion in that question,
Sure.
which is, well, I have to do all this really hard work to overcome OCD and leave this really comfortable, great life I'm living. So in a way, it doesn't take grit because what it takes is a realization of your life with OCD sucks, and whatever we're going to do, no matter how hard it might seem, it's not as miserable as your life staying this way forever. So I feel like those are my choices. It's like saying I can't do this. It's like, okay, but if you're saying I can't do this, this other thing is your life forever. So I think it's often good to recognize it's not a choice between the hell of Patrick and John. God, that is a scary thought. Or the good life. It's like OCD hell or the life I wish to lead. So yes, it might be hell to get there, but it's hell to not get there.
Yeah. This is a fun one, John, and I think fun for you and I just to chat a little bit about how do we know so much about OCD?
I have my answer. I'd be curious. I'll give mine, but I'd like to hear yours.
I please give yours too, because I think your history is amazing in this field and what you've done. So I think everyone should really hear it. Mm-hmm.
Whenever I talk to anyone about a problem they have, what I spend my time doing is not thinking about, oh, what's wrong with their thinking or how should they think about it, which I think a lot of therapists do. It's like, oh, that's that. We need to do this. My first thing I do is, okay, somebody's just describe the rules that govern their existence. And I just try to sit and imagine what would it be like if they were my rules, which is very different than going like, wow, that sounds really hard. I wouldn't do that. It's like, okay, but what would it be like if that were my rules? And so I think apparently I have a good imagination because, and I know Patrick's the same in this, my favorite compliment is when somebody asks me if I have OCD, because I realize I think I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So I'm afraid that I think what I'm doing is empathy. And I think empathy, even if you're going among professionals, is shockingly absent. People are great at sympathy, but like trying to like, what is it like to be you? And then trying to and then maybe the one skill I have is not so much imagining what it's like, but being able to put it into words that make sense to the listener so they know I get it.
I like the idea, John, that I try to help people, but not in the way they think they need to be helped, which is what always throws people off. Because people think they need to be helped by getting enough information or doing enough compulsions. And could I just guide them into doing that so that this OCD will go away? And to really be able to speak the truth to someone to say, that's not the way to get help. But there is another way. And if you're willing to work with me on that, I will give you that help that I know to give you so that you learn not to make OCD go away, because we haven't figured that out yet. But we have learned how to help people live with OCD and not be bothered by it.
Yeah. And I think
And
what you're saying is so
yeah,
true because, like, this weekend we had the convention and we had this thing where we did 20-minute free
yeah.
consults. And
Those were great, by the way. Really fun. I
thank you.
enjoyed those. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And one woman really appreciated, she was talking to me and I said, because she was telling me she's kind of resistant and like, all that. And I said, well, but that's okay. But if this is your approach, you're never getting better.
Yeah.
And her response was like, wow, thank you. Like my therapist is always too nice. And I think I needed that. It
Mm-hmm.
was kind of like, that's a highly likely fact that you won't get better.
Yeah.
I still stick to my uncertainty, but going with the odds. So yeah. Well, look, a question for you down there.
Oh, really? Where? Tell me where.
Chris Miller.
Let's see if I can find it. You might have to just read it for me.
Oh, hey, Mr. McGrath. It's Dr. McGrath, but he doesn't care. I just call him Patrick. I have a question. Can harm and God mix in OCD? Like, what if God wants me to hurt someone or something? Thank you. Which, by the way, I'm going to let Patrick answer, but dead seriously, if I know it's God, I'm just listening. I mean, you have to convince me it's God, but I always feel like that would be obvious, Like I feel that's my rule. If I believe in God, like I will know it's God, but like, hey, God says, And actually, what's really great. I'm sorry, I said I'd let you answer, but in the Bible, Abraham's told, hey, let's knock off your son Isaac, and he's like getting ready to stab him, and luckily, God didn't really mean that. Now, if God really meant it, then like I guess that's what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, I better not tell that to my wife because I think if I said I'd kill her grandson if God told me to, it'd be like,
You'd wake up with a knife in your chest.
It's more like, hey, John, you can go to hell.
Yeah.
That's, fine. You go to hell, I'm fine with it. So I guess in that case I might choose hell, but only to please my spouse.
That question has two of my other favorite words in it, which are what if, right? And here's what I think, and John, I think you'd agree with me, and maybe this goes back to the other question too of why are we good at what we do? We don't get shocked, first of all, by any of these questions. I mean, John and I could hear anything and go, oh, okay, that's kind of fascinating. That's really interesting. So number one, you're not going to shock either of us with one of these things, which I think first surprises people because they're shocked that we're not shocked, because they would assume everybody in the world would be shocked by hearing what's going on in their head. And number two, there's either a what if or an implied what if in all of these things. So what ifs do I need to be afraid of? Right? Because there's an infinite number of what ifs that John and I could propose right now to all of you. And almost every single one of them, you would all go, dumb, stupid, nope, no. But once in a while, we're going to hit one that you're going to go, oh, well, that would suck. And then you're going to kind of go down that road of, well, what if that, what if that? Okay. That what if is no different than any of the other what ifs. It just, for some reason, that one piqued an interest in you. That one, for some reason, flipped a switch. That one maybe brought up a memory or a thought about something else going on in your life, or who knows what it was. But you've decided that what if is suddenly now more important than any other what if in the world. Now, I think John would agree with me. We don't think any what ifs are all that important. And we don't put a lot of stock and time into what ifs. Oh, but you know who does? OCD. OCD loves a what if. Yeah. Go ahead, John.
They could even be important.
They could be. Yeah.
But here's the thing. The reason it doesn't matter is if the what if happens, I'll have to deal with it.
Yes.
It may be low probability, high probability, or moderate probability. I'm only in trouble if I say that can happen. So if I'm afraid of cancer, well, okay, cancer might really happen. And yes, I'm going to have to cope with it. What if my spouse dies? Well, like that. Sorry.
Jeez.
Yeah,
but welcome to my life, John. Yeah,
yeah. But I mean, I have. Damn it. I just want to say, and I think you'll agree, social skills are not my forte.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing the one example that really hits home. Oh, your
Yeah.
wife died of cancer. Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. But I'm okay with that because you're right. It did happen,
but I have to find a way
happen.
to cope with it. And so I always say that coping with uncertainty is saying, no matter how likely or unlikely, I hope to cope. And somebody says, well, what if you can't cope? And all I can say is, well, I don't know if I can cope with anything. I've seen people who cope in a really amazing way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like doesn't mean I that let me know that lets me know it's possible. And I hope that I do that well. And I don't get to find out until one of those things happens, which presumably something's going to happen sooner or later that's going to be awful to cope with.
Mm-hmm. So what if God tells you to do something? Well, we don't know, right? Maybe there is or isn't a God that will tell you to do or not do something. We don't know. How much time and effort should we put into thinking about that? Or can we accept that as any of the other bazillion what ifs that could also
I like thinking about it, but I want to think but I'd want to think about it like, well, okay, what would I do? And what's the nature of a God who tells me that? Like God could, I mean, I happen to have a good God, but God could be really evil. And so like, do I want to believe in an evil God? And not that because, and I say, do I want to believe in an evil God? Whatever God I believe in, I am potentially making up. So I don't get to know the true nature. I've decided I'm going with the good one until somebody can prove me wrong. Really good luck. But not that I know it's right. It's just like, that's the choice I've made. Just like if somebody says, I don't believe in God, it's like, well, you might be right, but you can't prove it.
Right.
So I'm making a guess, but I'd be kind of curious, like, okay, well, gee, that's interesting. I mean, like, basically the difference between you and a great novelist is they're going to think through, like, all right, let's start with that implication. And there are a bunch of different stories I can write about that. I'd want to think about them. They're all possible outcomes. And in terms of the ones I don't want to happen, nobody gives me a choice.
Mm-hmm.
Should we end up with Knox Girl? Because she has a nice, easy question for real.
Go ahead, read it off. Mm-hmm.
When should someone consider meds for OCD versus just sticking to ERP?
Oh, go ahead.
And OCD is a learned and a biological disorder.
Mm-hmm.
We know statistically, meds alone only lead to 25, 50% improvement, which for a lot of people leaves them pretty symptomatic. However, that doesn't mean like they're not necessary, because we have a lot of people who with treatment get better. They go off meds and discover, holy crap, it does something. So I think I would never say to somebody, don't take meds. I mean, I think if somebody's just going to treatment, my idea is let's start with the shotgun approach. We know that meds are really frequently going to be useful, and we're going to do ERP, and let's do both. And maybe later we can see if you can go off them. Some people, well, what if I can't get off them? And the reason you wouldn't be able to get off them is not addiction, is that your body actually needs them and you needed to be on them. So do you have to take meds forever? Your body will decide. Some people can go off for a while. Some people can't. And so I can't fight biology. So I would be considering meds now. Some people I'd be really arguing with because their OCD is so horrible, and it's like, you're out of your mind, you have to take it. Somebody's like, well, you don't have to take it now. It doesn't mean that it won't get worse. You won't have to take it later. I used to get my teeth drilled without Novocaine because I was scared of the needle. And finally, the dentist one time for a particular cavity said, like, you got to do it for this one. So I was like, oh God, you got to do it. So I got he gave me Novocaine, and my thought was, wow, what an idiot I was. Because it was way better with Novocaine than without.
Sure was, yeah.
That's what I'm thinking about medication, Knox Girl.
Just for you, before we go, Scott says, before we close, I know it's not super important, but what game have you played for 160 hours?
Baldur's Gate 3. Oh my God. Amazing. You can choose, and the choices are too crazy because the game can be played any which way. It doesn't just drilled down to here's the final set. You can kill off major characters. You can do good. It's like the game, and this is literal, although not discrete. There are literally 17,000 variations of the ending because there are that many things you can do that will make alterations in how it plays out.
Incredible. Everyone, thank you once again for joining us. John, as always, our monthly chats are a blast. And
Yes.
we will see John again in a month, and I will see all of you again next week. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night. We'll
Take care, all.
see you soon.